All right, King, lay it out.
We got the anti-Billy campaign here, so we should just start. I've explained it briefly on my podcast, but we should just explain what that is and, what that means to us and what we want to do with this podcast. So we had an official definition at some point of a Billy.
You can look it up in Webster's.
Down somewhere.
You can look it up in Webster's dictionary if you're curious.
Yeah, look up Billy.
You'll need the 2017 edition, and you'll see that King and I are both credited with that term.
It was just submitted.
Anyhow, what is a Billy, King?
I think it's many things, and since we've been using this term and going through this for years now, are more experts at identifying Billies than most people, but I think we agreed last time that the basics around it are somebody who, isn't aspiring to anything in life.
It's a huge problem.
We agree on that point as far as Billies are concerned.
I think that's by far the most important point. I don't care what you're into, be into something.
Yeah. Yeah, if you want to cook a steak, be the best steak cooker you could possibly be.
I mean, for me, that's squeezing the juice, the richness out of life, and if you're not doing that, then I'm not entirely certain what you are doing.
Sure.
For us, that tends to function around music and art, but we have a lot of other interests, many of which we probably don't get to pursue as much as we would prefer.
That's definitely true.
It's putting some chips in the game and playing it to the best of your ability and not living your life behind a fucking TV is usually a pretty good start, I think.
That's a good start, sure. Not necessarily following society's conventions could be one aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, to touch on that for a point,
sure.
From time to time, I've been accused of, and I'm sure I've accused you a few times, King, of being, I don't know, we have our quirks or slightly, what's the word I'm looking for?
Quirks is a good way to put it, I would say.
Yeah, sure. Quirks is a fine word. But, the fact of the matter is nobody really cares what you're doing, period. Everybody's so self-absorbed with their own life, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but they don't have time to pay any attention to you. So, with that said, you got a free ticket to do whatever you want, because nobody is going to cast any judgment on you because nobody cares.
That's true.
And if they do, then we could probably make some assumptions about that individual.
That's true. People behave in a strange way because they think people care what they do, and nobody cares.
To something I enjoy doing. I love cold weather, and I love being in the forest. I've been known to ski forest trail bare-chested in a hailstorm on more than one occasion.
Sure.
Kind of an odd thing to do, but that's what I wanted to do. And, there's a lot of characteristics about that little tale right there that a lot of people would be uncomfortable with. Case in point, a grown man skipping. Guess what? I do whatever I want. No.
Sure. Yeah. And that's,
a common thing. And I could be fearful of someone's accusations, I'm bare-chested in winter. People would think, oh, that's strange. Yeah. I love cold, so that's what I want to do.
Sure, why not?
And, I don't obsess over the fact that I don't look like a super... They don't call them supermodels for men, I don't think. I don't know what they call them, but
Billies.
yeah, perhaps.
No, I don't know what you call a male model, but you know.
Can we get Hank Hill on the line? What's he got to say about this? No,
Billy might be a start.
but so I'm using this ridiculous tableau to point out the fact that nobody cares, and if they do, that I could probably make some assumptions about what they're doing in their own life, because who has the time or energy to focus on what somebody else is doing when you're obsessed with your own endeavors?
Well, that's definitely true. People who are at the top of any game, anything that they're doing, are basically obsessed with it. I mean, we see that time and time again.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I'm kind of gearing back up a machine and some endeavors of my own life, and I'm actually kind of, I don't know how other people function, and I know everybody's different, but I always have found like the 0 or 10, 0 being I'm not doing anything, complete, just sitting and thinking about what I'm going to do perhaps, but no action is being taken. And then like full blown, okay, I'm in this obsessively and I'm thinking about it all day long.
Right.
Period.
Sure.
Have you come across many people that take the middle ground? And I mean, I'm not saying one's better than the other. That's just how I tend to function.
Sure.
And but once you get your mind into something, it can be very difficult to kind of get out. Not that you would want to.
Well, yeah, but I tend to think most people live in that middle ground. Like, there's a lot of people that do something sometimes. They're, they might have, some level of creativity with them, so they're, maybe say painting or drawing, but they're not obsessed with it. They're not on that level 10, and they're doing it sometimes, occasionally, around everything else when everything kind of lines up in a certain way and they feel like they can. And I would call that a middle ground, because they're not doing nothing. They're sometimes doing something, but they're not on that obsessive level that it takes to get to the to the top, if you will.
And by the top, we mean what?
Well, I mean, doing the best work that you can do, because everybody's abilities are different, and obviously the top for a guy like Sibelius was different than the top of a guy like Bach, but you wouldn't put one above the other in some sense. I mean, just everybody has their own styles and their own abilities and their own ways of working, and both of those guys, we can say, reach the top as far as they are concerned.
Yeah, the pinnacle of their own voice.
Exactly.
And I think, it's not so much comparing, well, so-and-so did this and so-and-so did this. It's you reaching the full...
your own full
realization of your own potential.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Matisse, was the polar opposite of a guy like Rubens, but they both reached the top of their own thing.
Without question.
And I think to do that, to reach that top, you have to be obsessed with it.
And, for our listeners that aren't artists, kind of a little... At some point in my life, as King pointed out, I got into computer programming. I've been a musician my whole life, but the Berlin Philharmonic isn't sending me checks, so I had to make a living. And what I came to realize is how well music had prepared me to jump into pretty much anything that I want, because you learn how to break down problems into these huge forms and then break them down into minute details. The same thing happens in visual art. So if anybody's wondering, well, why the hell should I listen to these two guys? I think there's some illuminations that have certainly happened over the years as a result of pursuing music and art as intensely as we have. And I think you can apply that to just about anything, because I feel like I could literally jump into any field I want and learn it.
Not only that, but artists in general, let's say, whether that's a composer or painter or author or whatever, I always thought that those kind of people would make good, leaders in other capacities, whether that's in business or, whatever you want to talk about, because art making, as you know, requires a huge amount of not only time management and, self-awareness and all that other kind of stuff, but you're constantly making decisions and, weighing the options and picking the one that seems the best at the time and throwing yourself into it and that kind of thing that I think can be applied to all kinds of other things in life.
So, I mean, it's my hope that, the listeners, this stuff's just in the ether, and you pick it up as a result of being around people who think and behave like that. Not that, we're shining examples, to be modest, but I think we've got some things figured out, and it's my hope to continue to figure stuff out for myself, and if anybody else can benefit from it, because we're going to go on doing this anyways. We're searching type personalities. We want to grow. We want to build ourselves up. And, that's the bottom line.
Yeah, no doubt about it. This is beneficial to us, whether one person listens to it or a million. So
that's the benefit too. We don't actually care if anybody does, although we're appreciative of any listeners that benefit and get inspiration, and we hope that you do, and we hope it, helps establish new boundaries and new goal setting and new courage for you to try things that you might not have done before.
And we've been doing that just for each other, through our almost daily conversations for, half of our lives at least, I would say. So
solid 10 years at least, yeah.
Oh, more than that. But, I thought we're already doing podcasts, essentially. Why not just, put a microphone on it and record it so other people can listen to it? Because we're constantly throwing out ideas or inspiration, or, hey, I tried this today and it worked really well, or, whether that's, hey, I had some back pain and I did this exercise and it did awesome, or, hey, I heard this symphony today and it'll blow your head off, so you should check it out. We're constantly going back and forth.
And, I think this is going to be a great platform if listeners are curious what we're going to be getting into. I think despite maybe this episode and its serious tone, it's my hope to interject humor at every turn, despite not actually being funny.
I like the sound effect.
But, and, philosophical concepts, I don't know, just trying to get through the maelstrom of life in the most agreeable way possible.
Sure.
And get as much as you want into the mix and block as many bad things that you don't want. And that's essentially what the struggle is all about, of being a modern person in the world, and how do I embrace everything that I want to do and make peace with or traverse the things that I have to do.
Sure, and to that point, and to your point before, this is going to be an entertaining, this episode might be a little less so since we're just kind of explaining what we're going to be doing here, but our conversations, man, they're entertaining. We don't talk about bullshit like politics or, we talk about cool stuff, and we talk about
I think there's enough frustration in the world. Do we need more politics or religion in the mix? You can find those at any number of other places. And if you're interested in that, then knock yourself out.
Absolutely. Go find it. Go experience it. But that's not what we're about. Whereas we spent a very long time, not that long ago, talking about, and we talked about this in the first version of this podcast that we did that got scrapped, but we talked for a very long time about why Sammy Hagar can't drive 55. And
oh no.
we came up with some good theories, and we talked about that for a long time, and that kind of thing, will appear on this podcast because that's what our conversations go all over the place sometimes.
And just for the record, so all you folks know out there, Sammy Hagar couldn't drive 55, not because he was a rocker, as one might assume, but actually the vehicle he owned was some kind of 80s Knight Rider type situation.
Yeah.
That literally would not let him drive 55.
I was thinking like a rusted, like 89 Corolla or something.
The problem is, we suspect, it got kind of stuck on like 50 miles an hour. What do you call that? Cruise control got stuck on 50.
Yeah.
And I mean, just think about the hell that would, the havoc that would wreak on your life. You're going into the local supermarket. You're trying to park. Your car is stuck on 50 miles an hour.
You're screaming into that parking lot at 50,
it's like
50 miles an hour.
I have a pretty great confidence in my parking abilities, but I don't know about taking a turn at 50.
So it's aggravating in that sense, and then it's aggravating because he's on the open highway out in Vegas somewhere trying to cruise around on a beautiful day, and he's barely going 50, and he's pissed off about it.
I mean, Sammy Hagar probably doesn't have to worry about this like the rest of us, but imagine, you're going out to work in the morning, you got your cup of coffee, you got to put your car in reverse. I mean,
you're automatically at 50 miles an hour.
Yeah, this thing, you're going from park to neutral, and I mean, that mental transition from park to neutral, you're like, oh shit, here it comes. He kicks it into reverse. The tires are screeching.
Yeah.
The guy just wants to enjoy his damn cup of coffee and head to work.
He just wants to have a cup of coffee and head over to the studio and have a nice day.
So I mean, that song is really a lament about not the fact that he can't drive 55, but the fact that he's forced to drive 50.
It's a lament about his nonstop 50 car. It puts the song in a different perspective.
I think so.
And that's exactly the kind of thing that we want to introduce to our audience, new perspectives on things.
Absolutely.
Now, we'll have conversations like that, but we've also discussed plans of, like, say, doing a reading challenge where we pick a book and say, okay, next week on the podcast, we're going to get through the first 3 chapters. This is just an example. Get through the first 3 chapters of this book, and then we're going to talk about it. So we'll invite... we're doing this for ourselves. Me and Dave are.
Oh, I'm selfishly doing this for myself because I'll tell you why. I don't read novels. I've always wanted to read novels. No one would enjoy the process probably more than I do. I love using my imagination and I love stories, but I'm kind of obsessed with other things. So I have a really hard time carving out time to read novels, and I look at it as very self-serving, I guess, would be the...
Sure.
And, but so what? Now I've kind of changed my perception on it. Yeah, it's self-serving, so what? This is my life, I can do whatever I want, and I want to read this novel.
Absolutely, and...
Maybe it is a waste of time, but perhaps not, because... As we've pointed out, or King, who is an avid reader, has pointed out to me many times, is there's great lessons to be learned in great books.
Oh, definitely. And so for our own selfish purposes, if we pick a book and decide to read it, we're going to get on and discuss it just because the two of us are reading it and enjoying it. But we're also going to invite anyone who's listening to join us on that and read it. And you can probably get something out of, hearing us talk about it as well, and, having an excuse and a reason to kind of force yourself to read it also. Mm-hmm. So that can be good all around. I mean, even if one other person does that, it'd be awesome.
Absolutely. And I mean, and I think that's what we're inviting ourselves to do and inviting others to do, which is pursue things that you wanted to do anyways. But
for sure,
if we can help nudge up the courage level even slightly, then, that's a job well done as far as I'm concerned.
Well, yeah, and we were just talking about it earlier today, how having like a specific goal in mind can just having that in mind can really help you achieve it rather than some kind of loose abstract thing. So if we say, hey, we're going to read the first 3 chapters this week, like, you have a definitive point that you need to get to, and I think it's a lot easier to get there, both for ourselves and for anyone listening that wants to join as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, we're obviously obsessed with music and art, so there's going to be a fair amount of that. I want to start getting into more philosophy. It's something I kind of do naturally, but I want to take out the time and read great books of the past and brood over their ideas a bit. And
sure.
Something we already do. This is just going to bring everything to a greater focus and a platform to have some key takeaways for ourselves and for others.
Yeah, for sure. And we've also talked about doing like super focused shows where we just, talk about Lord of the Rings the whole show just because we love Lord of the Rings.
Or Schubert's Eighth Symphony.
We could do an entire podcast on that, I guarantee it.
It'd have to be like about 20 hours long.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
For those of you still tuning in at 19 hours and 56 minutes.
We're going to break down the last 3 seconds of Schubert's Eighth Symphony. So,
and now for our closing arguments.
Buckle in. The final 3 notes. What a great piece that is, though.
Well, yeah. I have intentions of listening to it later today, which is exactly why I brought it up.
Speaking of that, reminded me, because we did this earlier, Dave and I do a groundbreaking thing that will premiere on this podcast, because I don't know that anyone else has really heard us do it. But you, as far as I know, you invented this. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we play this game all the time called Somebody's Gotta Die.
Oh yeah, you'll immediately find out where your allegiance lies.
We throw out 2 figures, whether those are visual artists or musicians or one of each, or we do it in all kinds of variations, but you're forced quickly to pick somebody that you want to keep alive, basically, and it tells you something about the other person. That's really what it's about.
And it tells us something about ourselves. So I played this game with King earlier today. I said somebody's got to die, Brahms or Schubert. And rather foolishly, what did you say, King?
To which I immediately replied, Schubert. Schubert has to die in that scenario. I can't kill Brahms.
This guy is sick.
I can't kill Brahms to save Schubert. But that
got severe emotional problems.
That tells us something, though. Just that alone tells us something about both of our personalities, because, let's face it, Schubert was a little more, I don't know how Schubert was a little more free in some ways.
Absolutely.
He was a little, he was prone to more, I would almost say, fantasy-like things in his music. And Brahms was, he's very structured, and he was a lot more serious, both in personality and, musically.
Incredible focus and incredible technique, brought to its highest level. But there's a sense of childlike innocence that Schubert had that very few others have. So that tells me something about King and his preference. That tells me something about myself and my own preferences. And for those of our listeners that aren't into Brahms and Schubert, well, we invite you to become so.